Story 1. So I want to say up front that I've been camping my whole life. I grew up doing it, I genuinely love it, and I'm not someone who gets spooked easily in the woods. I say that because I need you to understand that what I saw that weekend wasn't me being paranoid or letting my imagination run. Something was watching us, and I know that because 4 other people saw it too. There were 5 of us, a group of friends from college, and we'd driven out to a campsite in the Ozarks for a long weekend in October. The site we picked was pretty far off the main trail, deliberately, because we wanted to be away from other people. We set up 2 tents in a small clearing with forest on 3 sides and a creek behind us. The first night was completely normal. Campfire, food, talking until late, went to sleep. Nothing weird. The second evening, just after it got dark, one of my friends went quiet mid-conversation and said, "What is that?" She was looking past me toward the tree line. I turned around, and at first I couldn't see anything. And then I did. Just beyond the trees, maybe 30 feet back into the woods, there was a figure standing completely still. Just standing there. Not moving, not making any sound, just watching us. We all saw it. Nobody said anything for a few seconds, and then someone said it was probably just another camper passing through. But the figure didn't move. We watched it for probably 5 minutes, and it just stood there in the same spot while we sat around the fire. Eventually, someone shone a torch in that direction, but the beam didn't quite reach far enough to make it out clearly. When we looked again about 10 minutes later, it was gone. We told ourselves it was nothing and went to bed. The next morning, one of the guys told us he'd woken up at around 3 a.m. and looked out of the mesh window of his tent and seen the figure again. Same tree line, different spot, further along. Still just standing there. He'd watched it for a few minutes and then zipped the tent closed and didn't look again. We packed up and left that morning, a full day earlier than planned. None of us really discussed it directly. We just all started packing at the same time without anyone suggesting it. On the walk back to the cars, we passed a ranger and mentioned it, and he didn't look even slightly surprised. He said the site had a history of incidents and that we'd made the right call leaving. He didn't explain what that meant, and we didn't want to ask. Story 2. I was really into solo camping and had done it loads of times without any issues. I was in a pretty remote part of the Blue Ridge Mountains, proper back country. The nearest road was about 4 miles from where I pitched my tent. I got there in the afternoon, set up camp, made food, and watched the sun go down. A completely normal start. I got into my tent around 10 p.m. It was a clear night and really quiet, the kind of quiet where you can hear your own breathing. I read for a bit and then turned my head torch off and started to fall asleep. That's when I heard the first footstep. One single footstep in the leaves just outside my tent, maybe 6 feet away. I froze and listened. Nothing followed it. I told myself it was an animal and tried to settle back down. Then another one, closer, and then a slow, deliberate series of steps moving around the right side of my tent, stopping, and then silence. The spacing was wrong for an animal. It was too slow and too even. I lay completely still with my hand on my torch and didn't move. This went on for most of the night. Whatever it was would go quiet for 20 or 30 minutes, and I'd start to think it had gone. And then I'd hear it again, moving around a different part of the campsite. At one point, it stopped directly behind my tent, close enough that I could hear breathing that wasn't mine. I didn't sleep. I just lay there until I saw daylight coming through the tent fabric. When I finally came out, my camp chair had been turned around to face my tent. My food bag, which I'd hung correctly in a tree about 15 feet from the tent, was on the ground underneath it, still sealed. And in the mud near the tree line, there were boot prints, not paw prints, going right around the perimeter of my campsite in a complete loop. I packed up in about 8 minutes, and I haven't done a solo backcountry trip since. Story 3. Me and 2 friends were 3 days into a 5-day trip in a national forest in Washington state, genuinely in the middle of nowhere. We'd eaten, the fire was dying down, it was probably midnight, and we were getting ready to go to bed. And then a man walked out of the trees into our campsite. He was maybe 50, wearing a heavy jacket even though it wasn't that cold, carrying nothing. No pack, no torch, no camping gear of any kind. He walked up to the edge of our fire like it was the most normal thing in the world and sat down on a log without being invited to. We were too caught off guard to react properly. He started talking, asking where we were from, how long we'd been out there, whether we'd seen anyone else on the trail. Friendly enough on the surface, but something felt completely off. His answers were vague in a way that seemed deliberate. We asked where he was camped, and he gestured behind him in a way that didn't correspond to any trail we knew. We asked where he'd come from, and he said, "Oh, just around," and changed the subject. He sat at our fire for probably 40 minutes. Every time the conversation reached a natural stopping point, he'd just start talking again. My friend said directly that we were heading to bed, and he nodded and then kept talking. My other friend quietly got his knife out and put it in his jacket pocket without the man seeing. Eventually he stood up, said it was good to meet us, and walked back into the trees in the same direction he'd come from. We listened to his footsteps until we couldn't hear them anymore. We decided to have one person awake at all times in shifts for the rest of the night. Nothing happened. In the morning, there was no sign of anyone having been camped in the direction he'd come from. No fire ring, no flattened ground, nothing. When we got back to the trailhead, we mentioned it to the ranger at the station. She pulled up something on her computer and asked us to describe him. She wrote some things down and said there'd been a few reports of a man matching that description in that area over the past month, and that they were looking into it. She wouldn't tell us anything else. We've all been camping since, but none of us go without telling someone exactly where we are and exactly when to call for help if they don't hear from us. That part's non-negotiable now. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more.